Hey doc, was wondering if GNRH agonist is at all recommended PCT. First cycle ran used 500 testananthate plus HCG 500 IU weekly, then PCT per recommendation of supplier ran HCG post every other day at 500 IU for a month, and then a week after HCG stopped, started 10 milligrams Novodex BID. I'm going to break out in laughter, so I might as well stop now. This reminds me of, I just have to say it. You know, you talk about a supplier. Aside from all the other obvious things that are wrong with that, I don't mean to say wrong, but you know that we could address as legalities and all that stuff. Run across this oftentimes. You know, with a guy who is giving you dietary or bodybuilding or health advice or whatever, happens to also be selling, be the supplier, there might be a small conflict of interest there. I'm sorry, but it reminds me of something I say to patients. Not that I'm not serious about this too, but in other areas is, people will go to a health food store and get vitamin advice from someone who is paid to stock the shelves with vitamins. I mean, it's really what it boils down to. It's amazing. Think about that. How many times have you seen someone overheard at the local health food store? No names, but so what do you have for prostate enlargement? And this is someone who is either a salesman or someone who's just paid to keep the stock inventoried right on the shelves. Yeah. Anyway, sorry for the digression, but anyway, wasn't getting morning wood after a few days off HCG, but since Novodex 10 milligrams BID, slight morning wood returning, though kind of still partial. My question, 1 to 2 weeks into this PCT, is it okay to take triptorelin 100 mics one time to hopefully better jumpstart HPA axis? And how do I know if I'm using enough Novodex for PCT? All I care about at this point is keeping my Lytic cells working properly so as to avoid ED and have a child one day. Thanks for the response. Okay, so first of all, there's a big difference between a GNRH agonist and triptorelin, okay? I know triptorelin is considered an agonist, but the upshot of triptorelin ends up actually shutting down your luteinizing hormone. They use it to treat cancer. So no, that would not, conceivably, yeah, you could do it just for a burst, which is actually what happens when they're treating prostate cancer. With prostate cancer, rightly or wrongly, and let's not get all sidetracked on that, they will give you something to shut down your own production of testosterone, because generally speaking, once you have prostate cancer, testosterone fuels the cancer. So, technically speaking, yeah, if you did triptorelin once or twice, maybe you'd get a little bit of a jump start, but you don't want to use it. When he says 1 to 2 weeks, that might not be too much to take it, but that or a GNRH agonist for a short period might jumpstart it. But why? That's just going up one step higher. It requires more dosing. It's more expensive. Stick with HCG is the way that most doctors in practice do this, because it's easier and cheaper to get the same effect. I think we addressed this earlier in another question about the timing here. Get the testicles working long before you discontinue your testosterone replacement therapy. In this case, it's 500 milligrams of testananthate, so you've definitely suppressed your endogenous production. And by the way, HCG 500 IUs weekly is not much at all. We should be doing it every other day, or that's typically what I recommend to get the testicles up and running before you stop. The Novodex 10 milligrams BID, that's a standard dose to block the estrogen receptors enough to get the pituitary to, as long as testosterone levels are low enough, to not stop the pituitary from sending a signal to testicles, and as he points out, specifically the Leydig cells, to stop sleeping and get working properly. So, okay, let's get in, making sure I'm answering his question. The only way you would know if you're using enough Nolvadex for PCT would be to check your levels of luteinizing hormone. HCG will not show up on a lab assay, even though it works like luteinizing hormone, as luteinizing hormone. You'll want to, that's the way you could make sure that the estrogen receptors are blocked enough for your pituitary to be sending a signal. The ED to which he refers could be just because, again, you don't have enough testosterone being produced endogenously. Not enough information here about when he stopped taking his last dose and when he started taking his post-cycle therapy, etc. But again, in short, I wouldn't bother with a triptorelin nor a GNRH agonist. I would just, again, it's typical to use HCG, cheaper and easier, and just as effective, if not more so. If for no other reason, it's easier to be compliant with it. And I would actually recommend using Arimidex over Nolvadex for the reasons we've spoken about in prior videos. Cost would be the only factor, perhaps, although there's a company out of Pakistan now that makes a very cheap and just as functional anastrozole, the generic for Arimidex.
And it's legal in the States?
Yeah, no.
Wow.
We have it here.
What's it called?
It's a anastrozole, the generic, okay. But it's either that or it's a loss leader over at Costco.
Wow.
But I've heard people getting a large amount of it for almost no cost. I mean, like, don't quote me, but $30 for 90 anastrozole, which is really cheap. But the point being that tamoxifen was made very cheap, and for good reason, thankfully, because typically we're talking about using an estrogen receptor blocker for breast cancers or any estrogen sensitive cancer. So it's a cheap version, but Arimidex does the same thing effectively in a different way, obviously, and again, I think in a much better way because it preserves testosterone. It doesn't allow it, as we talked about earlier, to convert testosterone into estrogen. So that would be those are my suggestions, and hopefully I answered all the questions there.
Yeah.
I got one more question here. This one, hey doc, I recently had gynecomastia surgery due to some ignorance from when I was younger, 21 to 23 years old, and not properly running pro-hormones. Well, that's kind of redundant. Pro-hormones, pro-hormones, classically, even doctors will look at the diagrams that show that, okay, this hormone can convert to this hormone. And as humans, you're going to be optimistic, and you're going to focus on the fact that yes, progesterone can convert into testosterone. But there's also a lot of other arrows and boxes on that diagram that we don't look at, where it can convert to another androgen, or certainly eventually to estrogen, which we found out with things like androstenedione back in my day. Okay, I don't think there's such a thing as running pro-hormones properly, right? And I always say, look, if you're trying to get from LA to San Francisco, why go via New York anyway? Go. And there were some reasons why a lot of doctors, particularly OBGYNs, would use progesterone and hope that it would raise a female's testosterone also. So, heavy-duty dose of progesterone. And sometimes it worked, but I've seen some crazy dosages of progesterone to get to a testosterone level that worked, and you can imagine all the spillover, if you will, from progesterone being converted to other stuff. So not the best idea. So anyway, not making fun, but just laughing at pro hormones, not the best idea. Now at age 32, I have since learned how to properly run many different compounds with success. My question is now that I have had the surgery and the glands have been removed, am I less prone to gynecomastia buildup because the receptors that were in the glands have been removed? If so, could that mean my normal pre-surgery AI, aromasin, dose may be less now due to the decreased receptors removed during surgery? Loaded question. The answer is don't stop taking your aromasin or your AI, aromatase inhibitor, because gynecomastia is not the only reason why we worry about estrogen. I know we've mentioned this before, but it's worth talking about again. Excess estrogen. And I say excess because guys and gals need some estrogen for joint health, for brain health, for cardiovascular health. We need some. But in excess, it creates water retention, fat retention, this moodiness and irascibility we talk about. And if that weren't enough, every male has genes for prostate cancer. And in the US, as of today, every male will have prostate cancer by age 82.
Really?
Yeah. I stopped morning rounds one time saying, excuse me, there are very few things in life, much less, in medicine that we can say, okay, 100%.
Oh my
it's definitely
God.
the minority of things that we can talk about where it's for always. So given that, and I'm not saying that we can stop it because we don't know that for sure. And it may be the exposure we had to estrogen when we were 20 that eventually led to, prostate cancer at age 82. But just like we know that excess sun exposure can lead to, a malignant melanoma, we don't say, well, we know that your exposure to sun as a teen, for example, particularly overexposure, is definitely associated with skin cancer later in life. I still wear my sunscreen, because more exposure sure as heck ain't going to help me.
Right.
And so, hopefully I've just presented many more reasons than just cosmetic or, sometimes painful gynecomastia as a reason for blocking estrogen. So I think I'm answering the question, hopefully short and sweet this time. Should you stop taking that? No. And we don't always know, by the way, that all the receptors have been removed anyway. So, I know people who have had gynecomastia not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Yeah.
Definitely continue to take, whenever you're using testosterone, make sure you monitor and modulate the estrogen for sure. Yeah, that was all he asked.
Thank you, Doc.